Well, I have always been a nerd. I started when I was 9. I found it much more interesting to work on my computer than to be outside. I had this little Commodore 64. Yeah, that's how old I am already. But it was really amazing to play with it. And as I went, yeah, when I went to university, there was no IT. But so I learned something else. But I had this passion about technology, computers, programming, and then the internet happened, and it was just very happy for me to be at the exact right time, in the right moment, and at the right place. So I was happy. I was like sort of at the beginning of the internet, experimenting with data centers and web hosting, and it was a very fun period. I've always been very passionate about the small lights in data centers and see things working by means of, how should I say it, letting code work. Well, it just didn't start like that. Since the year 2000, I have been creating startups. And in the beginning, it was really, yeah, again, being this nerd, it was really about how can we be smarter, how can we automate data centers, how can we create better storage solutions. And we've created X number of technologies. And yeah, honestly, it was probably for a part out of the ego too. Like a young engineer, we can do this, we can do better than the big companies, and we created technology. But so as we went on and as we had some exits, it changed a little bit. It was no longer just creating technology, but it got a purpose. And first the purpose was technical. It was how can we, with less resource, less computers, less data centers, less energy, produce the same output. But as we went, it was also more about how can we make a better place, how can we make the world a better place, how can we use technology to bring a change into people's life. And more it went into that direction. And Threefold Tech is, if you want, it's a result of now more than 18 years trial and error and creating more companies and more technology. And it's, to me, it almost feels like this step where everything comes together and we create something really big, but in a simple way, which has a very meaningful impact. Interesting question. Um, I look at the world today as a pyramid, or many pyramids, I should say. Anything are pyramids. I mean, the government, of course, but banks, even the internet became a pyramid. There are less than 20 companies in the world that own more than 80% of all the capacity which makes up the internet. So it's not this neutral place anymore like it was in the beginning. When I started, I was one of these lucky guys starting with the internet, and then it was really free. People just connected the networks. It was like no strings attached, free flow of information. It was a very cool period. But today that's no longer the case. Today we became a product. We are a product of companies like Google, Facebook, and so on. And basically, the information we create, the information we collect, is being used as a commercial good. And this is not what we believe in. We believe that through technology, we can help people to express themselves, have access to education, basically do their own business even, but for that, it should be neutral. We need to make sure that that information which is being created will not be abused. And as such, the technology we have created allows us to create a new internet. And this new internet will be much more efficient. It will be more green, it will be more neutral. So that's why we believe that through technology, we can enable people and give them their freedom again. The IT industry is an incredibly big industry. It's more than $1 trillion industry. And IT is no longer this nice to have product, but it's a necessity. It's becoming something like electricity. I mean, without IT, you cannot run a business anymore. But it's super big, and today it's also very complex. It's not a commodity. It should be a commodity. It should be everywhere, but it isn't. It's super big. The more complex it is, the more that some of these companies can make their profit on it. And this is not what we want, and this is also not what the world needs. So yes, we can have a very big impact on this industry, because what needs to happen is it needs to become more easy to use, it needs to become more simple. In fact, if you would like to put it in one sentence, what is the core of what we do? I would say it's less is more. So we try to, as an example, our engineers, their main rule is that they have to have less code at the end of the year than the beginning. And that sounds very weird for a technology company because you're creating something. But this is what we believe in, because if at the end of the year they end up with less code, it means they have been able to make things more simple because they could throw things away. And this is exactly what needs to happen in the IT industry. So through our technology, we have been able to condense today like 20, 30 plus layers. Today you have like so many different layers, storage, networking, anything really, and many of these layers live inside of each other. And they're way too complex. And we've managed to no longer have to use all of these layers. And one simple layer, which is self-healing, where no people are involved, can replace that complexity. And it's that one layer, you can imagine that once we can prove to the world that this one layer, which is empowered by blockchain and by self-healing technology, if this one layer can prove to be useful on a global scale, that it will have a huge impact on this IT industry, because so many things will simply become obsolete. So yes, I do believe that it can have a huge impact on the IT industry, and that's of course why we have created a technology company, and we now will work with investors basically to make this a success. Well, blockchain is fantastic. That of course I don't have to explain. But it's also hype. And I see a lot of resemblance between the year 2000 and what's happening in blockchain today. In the year 2000 we had this dot-com bubble. It was a huge bubble, and also then we were in that bubble and we decided not to follow it. Well, the same thing is happening today. It's a huge bubble. Just like any bubble, there are very good things about it. It shows that the world wants it. It shows that there is room for it. But the hype is too much. So I expect that there will be some correction later on. But blockchain will never go away. It's something which will stay, has to stay. It will become something more normal. But the implications on the world and on currencies and banks and governments will be phenomenal. What blockchain allows us to do is to go from a centralized world, which are the pyramids, to basically a fully decentralized world. Yes, I believe that more than 90% of the blockchain companies out there are fried air. Just like in the year 2000, 90% of them were also fried air. But the 10% who have good products, they will be strong and they will come out as winners. And that's what we believe will happen. There are also way too many currencies today. There are more than 1,000 digital currencies, and most of them are, again, fried air. They are not really backed by anything. Valuations of these companies are huge, and most of them will have a very hard time defending their valuation, just like in the year 2000. So I foresee that there will be a correction, but let's not forget what really happened. Something like blockchain, Bitcoin is still one of the best technologies ever created. It hasn't been hacked. Sometimes you hear something about security issues, but it's never in the blockchain itself. That's where people get into the blockchain, websites, maybe some e-commerce or exchanges. But the technology by itself, the fact that now millions of people together are using something like Bitcoin, that's phenomenal. And that happened, and it came out of nothing. And that has huge implications for the future. So it's a step we are now taking as humanity, basically, for changing a lot of things around IT, and it can allow us to rethink it. And that's also what we did, right? Thanks to the blockchain and thanks to technologies around it, we could also rethink how to build an IT system. And that's exactly what we've done. Blockchain is big. It means a lot of things to many people. But there is something which we call the blockchain dilemma problem, which is, or the blockchain dilemma, short. What it is that today in blockchain world you have to choose. Or you have to choose between security, and if today you look at security of Bitcoin or other products, it's really good, but it's almost by definition not scalable. Because I need something which is called proof of work, which basically means mining. So you need to burn through energy, which is not very green, not green at all in fact, and you need that to get to the security. But as another consequence of working that way, it's not very scalable. Every transaction you do needs to be repeated on many locations. So it's slow by design, and it's super difficult to change that. At the other side, you can choose for less security, and then you can get scale. And they call these permission blockchains, and then you can do something else, which they call proof of stake. Yes, you can get to much more performance that way. You can get even to privacy. But so far, no one has been able to resolve both. Because what you really want is you want the security of the current blockchain products like a Bitcoin and so on, and you want to have the scalability and the performance from the stake of proof technologies. Well, that combination needs to be made. And that's exactly what we have resolved. This sounds, of course, almost too good to be true, but we resolved that by means of building something completely different. And that gives us a lot of benefits. Today, the perfect blockchain does not exist. There is something which we call the blockchain dilemma problem. It basically means that you have to choose between security or performance. So, or you go for security and you're doing something which they call proof of work. And most of the blockchains today out there are proof of work. Proof of work means that people are mining for the blockchain. It's absolutely not green, like Bitcoin, as an example, uses more power than most of the countries in the world, so it's really non-green. But that gives you very good security. And still to date, Bitcoin and other blockchains have not been hacked, so it kind of proves that it's very safe technology. There is also another type of technology, and they call this proof of stake. And proof of stake is much faster, it's much more scalable, you can make it private as well, so it has a lot of benefits, but it can never be made as secure as the proof of work blockchains. And this is a dilemma which the industry is facing. So you have to choose, or you go to like what they call a permission blockchain, which is a private blockchain, so you can have the performance, but not the security because the nodes are managed. Or you can go to a public blockchain, which is proof of work, and that is very good security, but by design does not scale. Now you see certain evolutions in this blockchain. We started with the blockchains like Bitcoin, which honestly today, still till to date, is a very good technology. It's very well made. And there are also the more modern technologies. As an example, Ethereum is a new type of technology. It is very successful, and there is now even a competitor coming. But these blockchains are more and more becoming like Swiss Army knives. That's what the industry wants. They want these blockchains to, like it's usually the case in a hype, they want these blockchains to do everything, right? They want to use this to store data, smart contracts, to basically, if they could, they would probably cook their dinner with it. But that doesn't make any sense. These blockchains like Ethereum, because they become so much a Swiss Army knife, they become dangerous. And let me give you an example. If you would compare a blockchain to a set of notaries, you would not go to one notary, but you would go to 100 notaries, and if the 100 notaries would give you the same result, you would trust it. That's kind of the principle of a blockchain. Now, in something like Ethereum, it's much more flexible, but now the notaries don't have the knowledge with themselves. Basically, you would ask the notaries to take a certain decision, but you would give them the contract, the rules they need to follow as well. So of course, this is much more flexible because I can now define how the notaries need to reason. But there are two big problems with that. First of all, if I make a mistake in my contract, in my rule set, basically I've completely undone the capabilities of a blockchain, because now every of those guys is going to vote the same thing because they're starting from a wrong rule set. And there have already been studies done that in something like Ethereum, it's very super difficult to create a smart contract where there are no issues in. The second thing is that you need to create a digital alternative to a notary. And this notary needs to be smarter because it needs to be able to understand all of these smart contracts. And in a way, it's like a new programming language. They call this a new runtime. But in new programming languages, you will have vulnerabilities. So the more that they try to make a blockchain like a Swiss Army knife, the more it's going to become less secure, because it will be much easier for hackers to find weaknesses in the system, or in the smart contract itself, or in the runtimes. We believe that the future is not there. You need to resolve the blockchain dilemma problem, and instead of running one blockchain, you need to be able to run thousands of blockchains, millions of blockchains. But this is not possible today, because in technologies which are proof of work, you can only run one blockchain. Because if you would run more blockchains, someone with having more capacity of proof of work could just take over the other guy. So basically, this can never work. So you need different types of technologies, you need different types of blockchains which don't have that problem, which are no longer proof of work, they are proof of stake. In other words, they are lighter, they are faster, and then you need to make them more secure. And more secure, in our opinion, means you need to make them less complex. So again, the less is more is super important. We have to go to less lines of code, we have to go to smaller blockchains, we have to go to less nodes being involved, but to let this work, you need to resolve this blockchain dilemma problem. So Threefold Technology is our tech company, which makes all of this possible. We have a great team of engineers, and we work on 3 different areas. So we have resolved what we call the blockchain dilemma problem. We made it possible for a blockchain to be fast and secure, but to let this happen, we had to reinvent the way how basically IT capacity is being delivered. It's almost a side effect from our technology, but as a side effect from our technology, we can create a new internet. And that's why as Threefold Technology, we have decided that the first use case we want to do is build a new internet. This sounds of course crazy. Most people say, what do you mean building a new internet? Is the current internet not good enough? No, it is not good enough because it's very power hungry. It's run in huge big data centers. It's only run in very few locations, and this needs to change. Now, as a side effect of resolving that blockchain dilemma problem, we can run computers much more efficient. We can put them everywhere in the world. We can make them self-healing, and as a consequence, you would be able to have storage and compute capacity everywhere in the world at a fraction of the cost. You can literally go as low as like 10 times less cost than any other technology out there, and that's obviously very important. Now, how can we resolve this blockchain dilemma problem? Because it seems like a pretty serious issue. Well, there are a couple of things which are needed. First of all, you need a new operating system, and we call this operating system the Zero OS. And why 0? Every of our components starts with 0. It has to do with the less is more concept. So we want to have less lines of code, and that's why we decided to call everything 0. It's almost like a non-operating system because we made it much more simple. We only took the Linux kernel, and starting from the Linux kernel, we have completely redesigned an operating system. An operating system which is very low and very close to the hardware. It's low level, so it's really close to the hardware, and it's really optimized to use the hardware features as optimal as possible. It's a small operating system. It's very capable. You can use this to run pretty much anything you would like to run. You can use it to run virtual machines, containers, which would be the alternative to something like Docker. You can use this to literally run any of your IT requirements of what you need today. But the OS is made differently, and it would bring too far in this interview, but what we did is that we're using the hardware in such a way we're doing what they call a lot less context switches, but I don't want to go too much into detail. But it basically means that just like people, if you would be interrupted 10 times in a minute, you would not be very effective. Well, this exact thing happens with computers, and that's what we're trying to eliminate. So the Zero OS allows us to be much more effective. About 10 times less energy usage. We need a lot less hardware than anything else out there. And also very important, there is no state in there. It's a stateless operating system. So you don't have to configure it permanently. And that's important for the second step. Because the second step of what we did, that's a self-healing step. Because imagine that you have this operating system and we're going to have millions of them. But if you would need people to manage them, that would be very difficult. First of all, it would not scale. We would have to hire hundreds of thousands of people potentially, and that would never work. It would also not allow us to resolve the blockchain dilemma problem. Because how can you resolve the blockchain dilemma problem? It's by making sure that no people are involved by managing the infrastructure. Because if you have no people involved, basically your hardware by itself, the set of operating systems, the network of operating systems, became a self-healing blockchain. It's a hardware blockchain. So it's not a software blockchain, something running inside your Windows or Mac, but it's basically the hardware by itself which became like a blockchain, basically. And that allows us to running this blockchain or running this network of computers without people. And so the second thing of what we resolved was self-healing. Self-healing is done by what we call a zero robot. So a zero robot, it's like a non-robot again. It's a robot who is smart though. It's not a very big robot, but it's an intelligent robot who can manage thousands, if not millions of nodes, and they all work together, so there are no people involved anymore. The third thing we had to do was, we want to be able to run this network without people, but who is going to manage the robots? So we can have the robots managing the operating systems, but who will manage the robots? And for that we need a blockchain. So we have a blockchain, and what is the purpose of the blockchain? It's to come to consensus. So instead of people having to manage the robots, every one of us who needs something from the network will work with the blockchain. On the blockchain, you will work with what they call smart contracts. And then through these smart contracts, you can work with the robots, and then eventually you will get from the network what you need. So basically, the Zero-S delivers you highly effective usage of hardware. The robots will deliver you self-healing so that no people are needed to run this massive network we're building. And the third thing you need is a blockchain to manage all of this. We didn't do an ICO. So an ICO is an initial coin offering. It's a very popular instrument today to fundraise, and a lot of companies did it. But ICOs, in my personal opinion, I don't like them because they remind me back to the year 2000, where there is this big hype, and so much money has been raised in these ICOs. But if you look at the valuations of those companies and you look at what they have today, to me, it feels like a lot of vaporware. And we don't want to be part of that. We want to be the alternative to this. We want our company to be solid, have a real backing. We want this company to be neutral. And that's another issue with ICOs, because if you do an initial coin offering, you basically are centralized because someone is creating money and you're offering this money, this digital currency, to people to buy. So by design, you are no longer neutral. You are centralized. And we didn't want to be centralized. So in the case of our grid, where we basically have created our own token. But this token is the result of something which we call farming. So how does it work? So we have this great technology from Threefold Tech, which allows us to build this new internet. But to build this new internet, a lot of funding is needed. We could have done an ICO, but we don't like it, like we said. So what do we do alternatively? So in our case, what we call farming is what in a Bitcoin people would call mining. So instead of mining, you can connect any hardware box to the internet. And as a consequence of connecting this box to the internet, you will farm tokens. So there is no centralization in there. There are no tokens created in our network which are the result of us printing cash. Basically, we are not involved in people putting boxes onto the network, connecting them to the network, and as a consequence, gaining those tokens. So there are two very big benefits of not doing an ICO. One is we are completely non-centralized, and the second one is we don't have to do an ICO. So basically, we're not in this hype cycle. There is, of course, also a very big downside, which is, yes, we have less money to work with. But I'm not even sure it's a downside, because I believe in startups to bootstrap themselves, to stay modest to what they need to do. And if you just end up with this $50 or $100 million, I've seen so many startups not executing because they have too much money, frankly. So even having a little bit less money is not necessarily a disadvantage. That being said, having some more money is something which we would welcome, and that's why we are fundraising in Threefold Tech. Threefold Tech has a lot of potential, and that's why we believe it's a very good idea for an investor to invest in there as well. So as an alternative to doing an ICO, we have two things. First of all, we get 10% on all the tokens being sold from the network, which is 10% going to the foundation, but I'll talk more about that later. And secondly, we can do fundraising in our technology company, which will also give us the necessary funding to bring us to the next level. Yes, we decided to create tokens because through tokens we can fund this huge project. The Threefold technology allows to build a new internet, but a new internet is a +$1 trillion undertaking. To give you an idea, there are market studies made which say that 3 to 4 trillion new investments are required to keep on growing the internet over the next couple of years. That's a huge investment. So even if we are up to 10 times more efficient, it's still a huge investment. So a lot of investments are required to build this new internet. And we could try and go out to investors and raise all of that money, but that would not be easy. It would also not be decentralized. So through creating tokens and allowing people to connect, any people in the world, to connect boxes to the internet and as such expand that internet, and as a consequence to have an economical benefit. right? Because now you are a farmer of the threefold grid, that's how we call it. And by connecting a box everywhere in the world, you achieve two things. First of all, you achieve something for yourself, because as a farmer, you can make money by putting such a box and connecting it to the internet. But you're also doing something for the world, because by expanding this grid, this network, you're providing internet capacity everywhere. And this is something which the world needs. So we believe that this token instrument is the best instrument of expanding this network, creating return for the investors of this network, and also keep neutrality. We decided to create the Threefold Foundation. The Threefold Foundation is a non-for-profit. To be very exact, it's a charitable trust. It's something which we don't control. It's basically managed by a group of what we call guardians, 60 people who will give instructions to that foundation. If that foundation would ever make profit, it would be used to do good projects with. Now, this foundation has been created as a neutral structure to allow us to promote this internet, because it's the only part which is maybe a little bit centralized. It's not very centralized because of all the different guardians protecting it. It's a charitable trust, so people understand it's a non-for-profit, but somewhere we need an organization making promotion, telling people about the grid, making promotion for the utilization of the grid, and we've decided to do that in that foundation. How does that foundation get funded? The foundation gets 10% of all the proceeds going through the grid. So all the farmers in the grid, they make money in two ways. The first way how they make money is by just connecting the box, and we call that farming. The second way how they make money is by selling the capacity to other people. So imagine you want to have some website in Australia. Right now you have to go to a commercial provider, but in our case you can go to any of these farmers, and there is a directory who makes that very easy for you. And then from that farmer you can buy that capacity, and it's super easy to do. Of course, for that you need to use these tokens, and as part of our own blockchain, 10% of all of those proceeds will go to the foundation. So that way we have a neutral income stream going to the foundation, and the foundation can use that 10% for education, good projects, promotion, making sure that the grid can keep on growing. The Threefold Tech is a completely different company. Threefold Tech is a startup. It's a tech startup how I have created companies in the past. Its goal is to create this technology. This company will have an exit somewhere in the future. That's the full intent of this company. So this company is of course centralized, like any technology startup, and it allows the Threefold Foundation to use that technology to build the new internet with. Think about it like the first use case of this fantastic technology we are creating in Threefold Tech is building a new internet. Imagine how much credibility Threefold technology will get if we can prove into the world that we have, as an example, 10,000 of these sites enabled with this technology. It's a huge endorsement, and this will allow us as Threefold Tech to bring this technology to many other locations. We can bring this to governments, to banks, to enterprises, to everywhere, and that will be the commercial benefit for Threefold technology. Like any startup, doing something like we're doing is not easy. But I think there are two main challenges we're working with. The first one is a people challenge. We're very lucky that a lot of people want to help. We have what we call ambassadors helping us out. We have a great engineering team. I'm very grateful that so many people are willing to help us. But that also gives us an issue, because working together with, at this point, more than 100 people, and making sure that especially lots of those people are not even being paid for. So getting all of these people working together for our goals and ambitions is not an easy task. A lot of people, and most of these people, are also not working in one location. We have our engineers in Egypt and in Belgium, we have people in Europe, we have people in Dubai, we have people on multiple spots in the world. And it's quite a challenge to bring all of that together. So that's one of the challenges we need to deal with. But we're getting better every month. The second thing is funding. Yes, we have funding. We have a lot of funding from friends, from ourselves. We have already farmed quite some capacity ourselves. I've invested a lot in this company, and as a consequence there is funding. So it's not like that we are in immediate danger to no longer be able to continue. But of course we need more funding, like any startup does. And we will fundraise in Threefold Technology, which is one thing we are going to do, but that's specifically for further developing that technology and making this also used not only for creating this new internet, but also for other use cases. What is really important right now is to get liquidity of our tokens. We have the tokens out there today. In fact, they are active since April, and the grid 2 is active since April. And now it kind of becomes time that we are going to get more people to actually use this token. Now, this crypto world is a little bit an ugly world today. If you want to be on a digital exchange, because we did not choose to create an Ethereum token like most people do. They call this an ERC20 token. We have chosen not to do that because we did not do an ICO. We did not want to be centralized, so we created our own blockchain and our own currency. Now, the downside from this is that to be able to allow people to buy, they need to exchange from another currency into our own digital currency. We are on some exchanges today, but these exchanges are not very big and they don't have a lot of volume yet. We could try and go to the bigger exchanges, but that's rather expensive to do, and it's also rather centralized. We believe it's potentially not the best mechanism. We have also created something called a decentralized exchange. So we are going to give something back to the world, and this decentralized exchange technology allows people to exchange digital currencies free of charge. We will be the first company in the world to promote a decentralized exchange where anyone in the world can exchange from any digital currency to any other digital currency, ours as well, without having to pay a fee. This decentralized exchange is free to be used, but it's also 100% neutral. There is no centralization in there. There is no website in there. There is nothing centralized in there. And we believe we are the only ones who are doing that today because we have no commercial purpose of this decentralized exchange. It's our own mechanism to make it easy for people to get in and out of our own tokens. And as such, we can give this back to the world and do something else which is good for the world and provide more liquidity. We want to start promoting this decentralized exchange more towards the end of this year, and for sure much more in the beginning of next year. We believe this will be a huge potential. This will not make money for us, but indirectly it will, because it will allow and it will make it much easier for people to get into our blockchain in and out, and not just our own blockchain, but any other blockchain which we can empower with our technology. The most asked question from anyone is like, how can you do this? You're saying you're going to replace these huge big data centers by small boxes and distribute them out. But this sounds very illogical because people tend to believe that scale is a lower cost. Well, this to me goes back to the pyramid again. In fact, I don't believe that. I believe there is an optimal size. Too small doesn't work. Too big doesn't work either. And if you look today at these big data centers, believe me, they're not very optimal. They're very big, sure, but it makes a lot of things also much more complex. They're mainly busy with looking at how to bring energy to those big data centers. One big data center uses more energy than a small town. It's really not that nice. But they're not really looking at how can we make sure we're using less energy. It's much more about how do we build a better data center. And we took a very different approach at this. Our approach was, let's turn this problem upside down. How can we make sure that the hardware we have available is used much more efficiently? When I started my young IT career, I had a Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 was a very powerful machine, but still, it had only 64 kilobytes of memory, which in today's terms is like nothing. It's really nothing. Today, my Mac is literally like 10,000 times more capable, but we did not get 10,000 more capabilities, right? It has more capacity, but still we don't use it. So how come over all these years that we lost that? So there are many reasons for that. One is that its hardware is too cheap, so many developers don't really bother. They just go for the result because time is much more important for them. The second one is that a lot of people, they don't know anymore how to use hardware properly. They use development languages which by themselves are not even that efficient. The third thing is there are so many more capabilities than is being used right now. So by new algorithms, by new ways of working, you can use that hardware much more efficiently. As an example, avoiding context switches, avoiding having to cut all of that compute capacity in many pieces. Because just like humans don't function that well if they are being context switched, so if someone comes to you like 10 times a minute, you're not going to do anything. The same thing is true for a computer. Still today, we have many CPU cores in our computers. They're very badly used. We know from statistics in data centers that on average, less than 10% of the capacity is used. And that's really crazy, right? So of course the obvious thing to do is that by new algorithms, by basically rewriting that operating system, by avoiding context switches, by pushing things much closer to the CPU, by using languages like assembler and C, you can optimize huge, really more than 10 times. And that's exactly what we did. So instead of having to build such a big data center and just making it completely full with standard servers and standard equipment and standard software, we have something specific, purpose-made, which is super efficient, very close to the hardware, and you can push it to the edges. Why are other people not pushing it to the edges? It's difficult to do. You have to rethink the IT completely because it needs to be self-healing, otherwise you cannot manage it. If you would have 1 million small nodes in the field, how would you manage that? And it has never been done before. Because today the IT industry is many layers on top of each other. So you cannot make this self-healing, it's way too complex. But that's exactly what we have resolved. So by making it self-healing, which basically takes the human element out, by being more efficient close to the hardware, we can literally save up to 10 times, and the small boxes can replace those data centers. Even if in such a big data center you have some scale advantages, but our advantages are much bigger. Of course we have concerns. There will be, we believe, a correction. Maybe I wouldn't go as far as a crash, but for sure the value of crypto in general will go down. It will not go away, it's too important for too many people, and it will definitely bounce back. I believe there is an opportunity for threefold token, because threefold token is a value-backed token, because it's the result of people putting capacity in the network. And the way how we do that is that all the capacity being put, it's a commercial utility, and we create tokens 6 to 8 times undervalued. And this allows the token to grow substantially. So we believe that there is room for a lot of new tokens. New tokens like threefold token, gold tokens, coffee tokens, name them, and there is a big opportunity for these tokens to grow. We believe that a lot of the existing crypto world, because there is today more than 400 billion into that market, will fly to the more reliable tokens. And we think we have a more reliable token. Of course, there will be a lot of negative publicity about tokens, and this will currencies, crypto, and this will have an impact on us too. But eventually we believe that it will bounce back and it will play out in our advantage. The threefold grid is already, for a startup at least, rather big. We have more than $80 million worth of commercial value in the network, which is really not bad. We're really grateful for the farmers to put already that much capacity out there. Of course, we want to see this network to grow more. But we did it in phases. Phase 1 was really about the blockchain, the token, launching the concept, and that's done. It's all there since April, May. Phase 2 is about getting more farmers in, because at the end we need much more capacity out there. And we're not promoting that much yet. We're not promoting the token that much yet. We're not promoting the capacity yet, but that's part of the plan. Because we want to have as many as possible farmers into the network before we start making more noise. The other thing we needed to have done before we start making more publicity is a decentralized exchange. This decentralized exchange is an important mechanism to make it more easy for people to get in and out of our token. And we believe that we have to finish that one before we start making more promotion. By the end of this year, for sure, we will be doing much more active marketing, and in Q1 next year we will be doing a lot of promotion of the usage of the grid. So we have a plan, basically. It's no longer research phase. This is more than 15 years of work, of course over multiple startups, multiple teams. A lot of our people are in there for a long time. With some of our colleagues who are working on this for literally more than 25 years. So it's the result of a lot of iterations. Now the current release is out there, it's in the field, it's being deployed on nodes. Of course, like any startup, we're creating new iterations and every iteration is going to be better, but this is a production release. In September we are launching a very big archive in Europe as an example. It will be a 60 petabyte archive, and that says something about how mature we already are. We believe threefold technology is a great company and it has a great potential. There is this huge opportunity to use this technology for also other reasons than building the internet. this IT industry, which is huge, can be literally disrupted. And we believe we are doing so. Now, Threefold Tech is a little bit a special animal, let's call, because it's not the typical startup where the founders or the investors are potentially trying to get as much out as they can. It doesn't mean that there won't be a lot of opportunity for investors to make money, but we have it structured a little bit differently. Basically, 60% of the proceeds of this company are going to go to our foundation, and they will be used to do good projects with. This is a wish we have as founders. We still have the wish to improve the world. We want to help, and we believe that this company has a huge potential. Personally, I believe that this company should be worth at least $1 billion in the not too far future. This sounds ambitious, this sounds crazy, but just like we've sold companies in the past, and I look at what we have right now, this needs to be at least $1 billion. But from that billion, if 60% of that goes to good projects, it's a rather easy way of funding a lot of projects for the world. 20% will go to new investors, and 20% is for the founders. And this makes a very nice mix, because we want this company to be run in a very nice way. It's not because 60% is owned by the foundation that there will be an unbalance. So basically, 2 votes in the board will go to the new investors, 2 votes will go to the founders, and 1 vote will be a neutral independent person. This company will be run like any startup. It will have a well-working board. All the IP, all the people, all the technology is in this startup. Right now, the startup is 100% owned by our incubator. Our incubator is called Incubate, not very original, and it's the same company who already helped 6 other of our startups to get to success, to get to an exit. So we're doing the same thing here. So basically, to put it in one sentence, we believe that the opportunity and the potential of Threefold Tech is amazing. It should be much more than $1 billion. We believe that by now going to investors, a very nice business case can be made. And of course, we believe there is a huge potential for doing good projects with the 60% of the proceeds as well.